Welcome back to another episode of Willie's Tales. Let's dive in. Don't you dare yell at my daughters. If you raise your voice at them one more time, I swear to God, I'll call 911. You want to scream at someone? Yell at your own kids. My name is Stanley Crame, and those were the last words my wife said to me before I disappeared. I stood in our living room, her living room really, staring at the destruction. Paint streaked across the walls I'd repainted 3 months ago. My work laptop sat in the bathtub, waterlogged and ruined. My mother's jewelry box, the only thing I had left of her, lay shattered on the floor. Sophia, 10 years old, stood defiant in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking. "This is unacceptable," I'd said. Not yelled. Said. That's when Bartier stormed in with her phone already out, finger hovering over those 3 numbers like a weapon. Her eyes held something I'd seen before. In my stepfather's eyes when I was 8, standing at a dinner table with an empty plate. "I don't have my own kids, Bartier," I whispered. "You know that." She crossed her arms. "Then I guess you don't get to yell at anyone." I walked to our bedroom, pulled out the black folder, and decided I was done being invisible. Please, before I continue, kindly like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. I left before sunrise with a backpack and $200 cash. The truck stayed. It was in Bartier's name anyway. Everything was in her name. I'd made sure of that when we married 3 years ago because I wanted to test something. Could someone love me without knowing I was worth over $1 billion? 4 years before meeting Bartier, I'd stood in my Titan Forge Industries boardroom, closing a $200 million government contract, while my CFO Leonard said, "Stan, you're 34 and worth 9 figures. Why are you still single?" I told him everyone only saw my bank account, never me. So I created a double life, wore Carhartt instead of Armani, drove a 15-year-old truck instead of my Mercedes collection, worked construction at the company I actually owned. When I met Bartier waitressing at Mike's Diner, exhausted and beautiful, talking about her 3 daughters with such pride, I thought I'd finally found it. Real love. She never asked about money, just laughed at my jokes and let me into her chaos. I resigned as CEO the day after our courthouse wedding, made myself small enough to fit into her world. Turns out you can hide $1 billion, but you can't hide being unwanted. I threw my phone in a dumpster and walked away from Stanley Crame entirely. Leonard called me 6 weeks later at the private number only he had. "Stan, you need to know what's happening." I told him I didn't want updates. He ignored me. 20 years of friendship earned him that right. He said Bartier celebrated my absence for exactly 1 week, had a dance party with the girls, told them they were finally free from boring Stanley. Week 4, her car broke down, for $400 she didn't have. Week 6, foreclosure notice arrived, and she realized I'd been paying the mortgage from a separate account this whole time. My name nowhere on the deed, just my money keeping the roof overhead. Leonard said she tried calling my disconnected number 53 times in 1 day, called my boss at the construction site. He told her I'd quit months ago, gave no forwarding address. She checked our joint account, $847 remaining. Enough for 2 weeks of groceries, nothing more. The girls started asking where I went. Bartier's answer, according to Leonard's sources, was always the same. He abandoned us because he's selfish. But alone at night, she finally Googled my name for the first time in 3 years. Leonard said when she saw the Forbes article about Titan Forge Industries, she dropped her phone and didn't move for 20 minutes. Leonard sent me the screenshot of what Bartier found. Titan Forge Industries CEO Stanley Crame signs $400 million defense contract. The photo showed me in a tuxedo from 2 years before we met, shaking hands with senators at a defense summit. She'd never seen that version of me. The version who commanded boardrooms and signed deals that funded entire cities' infrastructure. Leonard said she scrolled through everything that night. Charity galas, Forbes, 30 under 30 from a decade ago, an article calling me the most eligible bachelor in tech before I disappeared from public life. Our wedding photo sat on her nightstand, me in flannel and jeans, that small, hopeful smile I'd worn thinking this time would be different. Leonard told me she zoomed in on my eyes, and maybe for the first time, she saw what had always been there, the sadness of a man making himself invisible to be loved. The lawyer she'd hired for child support called her the next day. Mrs. Crame, your husband established $2 million trust funds for each daughter, full college rides. Leonard said Bartier asked why I didn't tell her. The lawyer's response, I think he wanted you to love him for him, ma'am. A year passed before Leonard told me about the private investigators. Bartier hired 4 of them, spent money she didn't have trying to find me. She tracked Leonard down at Titan Forge headquarters, but he wouldn't let her pass the lobby. He said she actually begged for my location, for a chance to apologize. He slid divorce papers across the marble table instead. Finalized 8 months ago, Mrs. Crame. Different state. You got the house, car, $50,000 settlement. She apparently went pale and asked about a prenup. Leonard showed her the document she'd signed at our courthouse wedding, barely glancing at it because she thought it was standard marriage paperwork. Clause 3 was clear. In event of divorce initiated by respondent's hostility, petitioner retains all premarital assets. Respondent waives claim to undisclosed wealth. She'd signed away billions because she never knew there were billions. Leonard said she whispered, "Where is he?" He stood up, looked at her directly, and said, "Healing, Mrs. Crame. Finally healing. Please don't undo that." Then he walked away, leaving her in the lobby of my empire, surrounded by everything she never knew I'd built. 3 years after I left, Leonard called with something different in his voice. "Stan, Sophia found something." He emailed me photos, the shoebox I'd left behind in my old workspace, filled with birthday cards I'd written but never given the girls. Cards where I told Stella how proud I was of her spelling bee win, how I'd stayed up making flashcards. Told Stephanie that her drawing of our family with me standing right next to her made me cry for an hour. Told Sophia I knew she was angry her real father left, and I promised I'd never abandon her like he did. Leonard said all 3 girls sat on the floor reading them, crying. At the bottom was the sealed letter I'd written to Bartier the morning I left. They brought it to her with shaking hands. I'd written everything in that letter, how I hid my wealth because I wanted to be loved for who I was, how I loved her daughters like my own, every school play and nightmare and Sunday breakfast. But I also wrote the truth, that she'd made it clear I wasn't their father, wasn't even really her husband, just someone she tolerated until I dared ask for basic respect. In that letter, I told Bartier about being 8 years old, standing at my stepfather's dinner table with an empty plate while he ate. "I'm not your real dad," he'd say. "You get what I don't want." My mother never defended me, just looked away while I learned that love meant making yourself small, invisible, grateful for scraps. I built Titan Forge to prove I mattered, made $1 billion to prove my existence had value. Then I met Bartier and thought maybe, finally, someone would see my worth without the money. Instead, I became that 8-year-old again, pushed aside, told I had no right to parent, threatened with police for daring to raise my voice once after months of silent disrespect. I wrote that I was done teaching her daughters that men exist to be used and discarded. The house was theirs, car was theirs, I'd left $50,000 and established college funds for all 3 girls. But I was done being invisible. In the postscript, I told her something she didn't know. Sophia's real father had called asking for money. I paid him $10,000 to sign away parental rights permanently. The papers were in the safe. I wrote, "She deserves better. You all did. I wish I'd been enough." 2 years later, Leonard called about Sophia. She'd tracked him down on LinkedIn, sent persistent messages until he responded. She was 16 now, desperate to apologize. Stella joined the messages. Both girls saying they understood what they'd done. They just needed 5 minutes. Leonard asked my permission. I told him no. He waited 3 days, then asked again. "Stan, they're kids who were taught wrong. Maybe they deserve a chance to make it right." I made him promise one thing. "If they hurt me again, you never let them near me." He agreed. He told them I'd be at the Rosewood Charity Gala that Saturday, black tie, and he'd get them in, but I wouldn't know they were coming. I actually did know. Leonard can't keep secrets from me after 20 years. I brought Catherine, the woman I'd been dating for 8 months, the CEO who'd taught me what partnership actually looked like. I wore my armor that night, the tuxedo, the confidence, the smile I'd rebuilt in therapy. When I saw them enter, Bartier and the girls, underdressed and anxious. I felt the old wound open. But Catherine squeezed my hand, and I remembered. I wasn't that man anymore. Stanley? Sophia's voice cracked when she said my name. I turned slowly, let the smile fade from my face. Sophia, Stella, Stephanie, you've grown. Bartier pushed forward, desperate, words tumbling out about knowing the truth now, knowing everything. I introduced them to Catherine as people from my past, and I felt Bartier flinch at those words. Stephanie started crying, saying they'd read my letters. They were sorry, begging me to come home. For 1 second, I almost broke, almost dropped to my knees and said I'd been waiting 3 years to hear those words. But Catherine's hand in mine reminded me of the 2 years of therapy, the nights I'd sobbed, realizing I'd been emotionally abused, the slow reconstruction of a man who'd spent his whole life accepting crumbs. I don't have a home with you anymore, I said quietly. Bartier started talking about what the girls needed, and something in me snapped clean. Need what, Bartier? A wallet? A babysitter? Someone to absorb your anger? People around us stopped talking. Phones appeared. I was never your husband. I was your employee. Sophia sobbed that it wasn't like that, and I knelt to their level because I did still love them in some wounded way. I did love you 3. Still do. I looked at each girl, saw the children I'd made pancakes for, helped with homework, tucked into bed. But your mother taught you that men are disposable, that love is conditional on silence and service. I stood up, straightened my jacket, felt Catherine's steady presence beside me. You deserve to know what real love looks like. It's not this, not begging, not 3 years of silence followed by desperation when money runs out. Bartier dropped to her knees right there on the marble floor. 500 people watched, recorded on their phones. She said she was wrong, that they needed me, that she needed me. I told her to stand up, that she was embarrassing herself. She said she didn't care, that they'd been drowning for 3 years, crying for me every night. My jaw tightened because I wanted to believe her, and that's exactly why I couldn't. You're not crying for me. You're crying for what I provided. Catherine touched my arm gently, not possessive, just supportive. I continued, voice carrying across the silent ballroom. When I asked for basic respect, you threatened to have me arrested for raising my voice. Once, after months of watching my things destroyed, my feelings dismissed. Sophia tried to explain they were scared, and something in her voice reminded me why I'd loved them in the first place. Of what? A man who made you pancakes? Who helped with homework? Who loved you? My eyes burned, but I didn't let tears fall. Your mother taught you fear of the wrong things. I was never the danger. Indifference was. Cruelty disguised as protection was. I took Catherine's hand. This woman who'd shown me what equal partnership looked like, who challenged me and respected me and never made me small. I forgive you, all of you. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Build a beautiful life, just not with me in it. I walked away with Catherine, left Bartier collapsed on the floor with the girls surrounding her. The video went viral by morning. Stanley Crame trended for weeks. People debated whether I was cruel or justified. I didn't care. I'd said what I needed to say, set the boundary I should have set 3 years earlier. That night, Catherine held me while I cried for the family I'd wanted and the man I'd had to become to survive losing them. She didn't try to fix it, just held me. That's love. 2 weeks after the gala, I sat in my office looking at financial reports Leonard had compiled on Bartier's situation. She'd lost her job, was facing eviction again, the girls were struggling. Leonard knew what I'd ask before I said it. Set it up. Everything. But she never contacts me again. He nodded and drafted the letter. I reviewed it. Mortgage paid in full, home transferred to her name, girls' college funds increased to full scholarships, $200,000 trust for Bartier releasing $2,000 monthly until she turned 65. Medical and dental coverage for the girls until 26. Condition, never contact me again. Leonard asked if I was sure. I told him I was done being cruel and done being weak. This was the middle path, the kindness of a man who once hoped to be family but learned he deserved better. He sent the letter. 3 days later, his assistant reported that Bartier had sat in her newly paid-off house for 6 hours straight, just staring at the paper. Tray. The girls read it together. Sophia apparently whispered, "He's still taking care of us even though we don't deserve it." Leonard told me that, thought it would make me feel better. It didn't. It just made me sad for everyone involved. 5 years passed. I married Catherine in a private ceremony surrounded by the 6 foster children we'd adopted together, kids from broken homes who needed to learn what healthy love looked like. We donated $50 million to family therapy nonprofits because I knew firsthand how generational trauma destroys people. The press covered our wedding, published photos of me surrounded by children, smiling that unguarded smile I'd finally learned to wear. They quoted me, "Catherine taught me that family isn't blood or obligation. It's choice. Every day we choose each other, choose these kids. That's love." Leonard showed me a report months later. Bartier had seen the magazine in a coffee shop. Her daughters were grown now. Sophia at Harvard on my scholarship, Stella volunteering with at-risk kids, Stephanie keeping my old letters in a scrapbook titled "The Dad Who Stayed Until We Pushed Him Away." They were good people becoming better, living the lessons I'd tried to teach. They never contacted me, respecting the boundary I'd set. Bartier wrote in a journal every night, Leonard's sources said, letters to me she never sent, apologies I'd never read. She lived in my house, survived on my money, but she was alone. She'd finally understood. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I started loving myself. The end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to support my channel by giving it a subscribe and reshare.